Presiding Officer, I warmly congratulate Bill Kidd on securing this important members' debate on preventing trafficking and protecting refugees, and on his excellent motion and speech, which powerfully joined the dots between the risk to women, causes and consequence of trafficking and violence, and importantly highlighted the solution. It's a timely motion given the war in Ukraine and the perilous situation facing women and children fleeing that conflict, and indeed the support offered from the government at this time. I want to acknowledge that trafficking is not a new concern, that refugees from across the globe are at risk, and that women are trafficked within Scotland and the UK, not just from out with. This is a complex issue. From our relative safety here, it's hard to put ourselves in a place to imagine the terror of having to flee our homes as war waged. The dangers and risks of travelling to new countries to seek sanctuary. The risk to women and children does not end when they arrive. Last week, I raised the issue with the Scottish Government of the need for active safeguarding and safety planning to continue in the medium and long term. As a government with a commitment to feminist foreign policy, I expect our government will have looked at this issue through a gendered lens and understand the unique risk to women and children. Of course, initially the areas of most concern were at border areas and transport hubs. However, Scotland must also be aware of the indications or attempts to recruit potential victims of human trafficking and take action to counter and prevent them. With Europol warning about individual opportunistic abusers posing as volunteers, as well as criminal networks who specialise in human trafficking, there are increasing concerns about the potential for perpetrators of abuse and human traffickers to exploit our current response to the war in Ukraine. Minister Neil Gray agreed last week to consider my request to include violence against women and girls partnerships and services in the response at both strategic and operational levels, and commit to carry out gender-specific risk and safety planning, not just at entry to the country, but also in the medium and long term. Helpfully, in a statement recently released by Glasgow Violence Against Women Partnership, they laid out in more detail the value that would bring. In addition to the measures that I mentioned there, they also asked that responses include specific community integration needs of women and children, and that they're cognizant of previous experiences of male violence against women and female-specific war crime, and importantly engage the Ukrainian community. They ask that we ensure there's sufficient awareness of indicators of gender-based violence, including human trafficking, and the particularly gendered nature of human trafficking, with frontline staff in key services such as health, social work, police, pharmacies, school and housing, receiving sufficient training and knowledge on the issues of the impact of violence against women. They must also fully understand referral pathways. Hosts and supporters should be trauma aware and promote trauma-informed responses. In terms of monitoring, oversight of where Ukrainian refugees are residing, the government should ensure disaggregation of data in terms of gender and age, and I hope that the Minister can tell us in summing up that that's already happening. And of course, it goes without saying that there needs to be robust safeguarding, vetting and matching procedures in place to mitigate the current risks, and that these are monitored and reviewed. To protect women when they're here, they need accessible, culturally sensitive, trauma-informed women-only services with access to interpreting, clear referral pathways to access support, and their medium and long-term needs to be met through rapid access to childcare and children's education. Now, these are things that are all in our gift to address to make our Ukrainian sisters safe and welcome here, and indeed do not necessarily require much more new resource or services, but rather a refocus and recommitment to existing policies. Many of these things should be happening already to ensure the safety of all women and girls in Scotland. Finally, Presiding Officer, whilst trafficking is a complex and wicked problem to address, there is a simple truth at the centre of it, which I know the Scottish Government recognise, truth that should spur them on to join the dots, act promptly and legislate. Trafficking in human beings is a financially motivated crime, and exploitation of prostitution in particular is motivated by the traffickers' knowledge of how much money they will make from men paying for sexual access to women and girls. Removing this financial incentive for criminals by tackling men's demand is the way to end this cruel trade in human suffering. Our words and policy intentions don't keep women and girls safe. We need legislation to punish those responsible, backed up by services to support victims. To end, not mitigate or manage this harm, requires change in law. I urge the Scottish Government to act now. Presiding Officer.